The space station hung in the darkness like a metal flower, its silver arms reaching out toward the planet below. Kepler 442b looked peaceful from orbit, with its blue oceans and green lands, but Dr. Elena Vasquez knew better. Down there lived the most dangerous hunters in the known galaxy. Elena stood in the observation deck, watching the planet turn slowly beneath them. She had been studying the Vorthak for 3 years now, and they still scared her. These creatures were like giant wolves, but smarter, much smarter. They hunted in packs, used tools, and could solve problems that stumped most computer programs. "Another trainer just quit," said Captain Lisa Barnes, walking up behind Elena. Lisa was the station commander, a tough woman who had seen too many good people get hurt trying to tame the impossible. Elena sighed. "That makes 12 this month. What happened to Rodriguez?" "Same as the others. He thought he could get close to the cubs. The little ones took one look at him and ran. When he tried to follow, they started howling. That brought every adult Vorthak within 10 miles running toward his camp." Elena shook her head. Rodriguez had been a good trainer. He worked with dangerous animals on 6 different worlds. But the Vorthak cubs would not accept him, just like they refused everyone else who tried to help them. The 3 cubs had been alone for 2 months now. Their mother, a beautiful alpha female the scientists called Nightshade, had died fighting off poachers. The criminals had been after her cubs, planning to sell them to rich people who collected exotic pets. Nightshade killed 4 of the poachers before they finally brought her down with energy weapons. Now the cubs were orphans, and they were dying slowly. The youngest one, barely the size of a big dog, was getting weaker every day. He would not eat the food the scientists left for him. He would not drink the water. He just lay in the corner of his cage, waiting to die. "We have tried everything," Elena said, pressing her hand against the cold window. "Altarian empaths, Rigelian mind readers, even those new android trainers from Earth's solar system. Nothing works. What about sedating them?" Lisa asked. "Force-feeding them until they get stronger?" "We tried that last week. The cubs went into shock. 2 of them almost died. Their nervous systems are too complex for most sedatives. The few drugs that work might damage their brains." Lisa was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "There has to be something we can do. I will not let those cubs starve to death in cages." Elena turned to look at her friend. Lisa had been fighting Alliance Command for months, trying to get approval for more extreme measures. But every request was denied. The Alliance wanted the cubs alive and healthy, but they also wanted them contained. Vorthak adults could tear through most metal like paper. Even the cubs were strong enough to hurt someone badly. "Maybe we are thinking about this wrong," Elena said slowly. "Every trainer we send down there is a professional. They know all the right techniques. They follow all the proper protocols. But what if that is the problem?" "What do you mean?" "Vorthak are pack animals. They do not trust outsiders, especially ones who smell like medicine and metal. Every trainer who approaches them comes with equipment, with plans, with the scent of the laboratory on their clothes. Maybe the cubs can sense that we see them as subjects to be studied, not as individuals to be cared for." Lisa nodded thoughtfully. "So what do we do? Send someone down there with no training at all?" Before Elena could answer, her communicator beeped. "Dr. Vasquez to the landing bay. New supplies arriving." Elena groaned. She had forgotten about the supply delivery. Every month, ships brought food, equipment, and personnel to the station. Today they were getting a new logistics officer, some young human cadet who would help organize their storage systems. "I should go," Elena said. "Peterson is sick, so I need to sign for the delivery myself." "A human, right?" Lisa asked. "I heard Alliance Command is finally letting some of them work on research stations." "Just in support roles," Elena replied. "They still will not let humans anywhere near actual xenobiology work. Too unpredictable, according to the review board." Elena took the elevator down to the landing bay. The supply ship was already docked, and crew members were unloading boxes and containers. A young man in a fresh uniform was checking items off a list. He looked maybe 25 years old, with short brown hair and curious eyes. "Dr. Vasquez?" he asked, walking over to her. "I am Jake Morrison, your new logistics coordinator. I have all the delivery forms ready for your signature." Elena liked him immediately. There was something easy and relaxed about Jake that made her feel comfortable. Most people on the station were always tense, always worried about the dangerous creatures they were studying. But Jake seemed genuinely happy to be there. Welcome to Research Station Omega-7, Elena said, signing the electronic pad Jake handed her. I hope you are ready for some interesting work. Yes, ma'am. I read about the Vorthak research on my way here. Fascinating creatures. I have always been interested in animal behavior. Oh? Do you have experience with dangerous species? Jake laughed. Nothing like what you have here. But I grew up on a ranch in Montana. Worked with horses, cattle, some wild animals that wandered onto our property. My father always said the key to working with any animal is to let them come to you, not the other way around. Elena felt a strange little flutter of hope in her chest. Maybe this young man was not a trained xenobiologist, but there was something in his voice when he talked about animals, a warmth that she had not heard from any of the professional trainers who had failed with the cubs. Would you like a tour of the station? She asked. I would love that. As they walked through the corridors, Elena found herself telling Jake about the cubs, about their mother's death, about all the failed attempts to help them. Jake listened carefully, asking simple questions that showed he understood the emotional side of the problem as well as the technical side. Those poor babies, he said when Elena finished the story, losing their mother like that, then being stuck in cages with strangers trying to poke and prod them. No wonder they do not trust anyone. Elena stopped walking. In all her scientific training, through all the meetings and reports and failed experiments, no one had ever called the cubs poor babies. Everyone talked about them as specimens, as research subjects, as potentially valuable assets. But Jake saw them as what they really were, scared, lonely children who missed their mother. Maybe, Elena thought, they had been approaching this problem from the wrong direction entirely. Outside the station, the planet turned in its ancient dance around the distant sun, and far below, 3 small creatures waited in the darkness, hoping that somewhere in the vast universe, someone might finally understand what they needed. Jake had been on the station for 3 days when the power went out. He was carrying a box of medical supplies down to level 7 when the lights flickered and died. Emergency lighting kicked in a second later, bathing everything in a red glow. Then the alarm started screaming. All personnel to emergency stations, came Captain Barnes's voice over the speakers. We have multiple containment failures on levels 6 and 7. This is not a drill. Jake set down his box and tried to remember the emergency procedures he had studied. He was supposed to go to the nearest safe room and wait for security to escort him out. But as he looked around, he realized he was not sure where the safe rooms were on this level. The corridor stretched in both directions, lit by the pulsing red lights. Jake picked a direction and started walking, looking for the green signs that marked emergency shelters. Behind him, he heard a sound that made his blood freeze, the screech of metal being torn apart. Jake turned around slowly. At the far end of the corridor, 3 shapes moved in the red shadows. The Vorthak cubs had escaped from their containment area. Even in the dim light, Jake could see how beautiful they were. Their fur was midnight black with silver markings that seemed to glow. They moved like liquid shadow, every step perfectly balanced and silent. The largest cub, probably the oldest, stood about 3 feet tall at the shoulder. The smallest one, the sick one Elena had told him about, was noticeably thinner than the other 2. Jake knew he should run. These were apex predators, even if they were young ones. Their claws could slice through steel, and their teeth could crush bones. But something made him stop and really look at them. They were not hunting. They were huddled together, scared and confused by the alarms and the strange red light. The smallest cub was shaking. Without really thinking about it, Jake sat down on the floor. The cubs noticed him immediately. Their heads snapped up, and Jake could see their eyes reflecting the emergency lights like tiny stars. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Jake did something that would have horrified every xenobiology expert in the galaxy. He closed his eyes. Every animal trainer knew you never took your eyes off a dangerous predator. But Jake remembered something his father had taught him when he was a kid working with spooked horses. Sometimes the best way to show an animal you were not a threat was to make yourself vulnerable. Jake sat perfectly still, eyes closed, hands resting on his knees. He could hear the cubs moving closer, their claws clicking softly on the metal floor. One of them made a low huffing sound, like a dog sniffing something new. The smallest cub reached him first. Jake felt a cold, wet nose touch his hand, then pull back quickly. A few seconds later, the nose returned, this time staying longer. The cub was smelling him, learning his scent. Jake opened his eyes slowly. The smallest cub was right in front of him, So close Jake could see the silver patterns in his black fur. The cub's eyes were golden brown, and they looked ancient and wise despite belonging to such a young creature. "Hello there," Jake whispered. "You are the one who has been sick, are not you? Elena told me about you." The cub tilted his head as if he understood Jake's words. The other two cubs had moved closer too, but they stayed a few feet away, watching their little brother with the strange human. Jake slowly extended his hand, palm up, the way he would approach a nervous dog. The smallest cub looked at the hand for a long time, then carefully placed one enormous paw on Jake's palm. The paw was warm and soft, with claws as sharp as knives, but the touch was gentle, almost curious. "That is it," Jake said softly. "I am not going to hurt you. I know you miss your mama. I know you are scared." The cub made a soft whining sound, and Jake felt his heart break a little. This was not a dangerous monster. This was a baby who had lost everything and did not understand why the world had become so cold and frightening. The other two cubs crept closer. Soon all three of them were within reach, watching Jake with those incredible golden eyes. Jake sat very still, letting them investigate him at their own pace. One of them sniffed his hair. Another one touched his shoe with a careful paw. That was when security found them. "Nobody move," shouted Sergeant Martinez, raising his stun weapon. Behind him, 3 more security officers aimed their guns at the cubs. The change was immediate and terrible. The cubs sprang away from Jake, their fur standing up and their lips pulling back to show teeth like white daggers. The smallest cub, who had been so gentle just seconds before, let out a snarl that made Jake's bones vibrate. "Wait," Jake said, getting to his feet slowly. "Do not shoot them. They are just scared. Step away from the creatures, Cadet," Martinez ordered. "We need to get you to safety." But as soon as Jake moved toward the security team, the cubs became more agitated. They spread out, putting themselves between Jake and the armed humans. The largest cub, the alpha, let out a howl that echoed through the corridors like thunder. "They are protecting me," Jake realized. "They think you are going to hurt me." "That is impossible," Martinez said. "Vorthak do not protect other species. They barely tolerate their own kind." But Jake could see the truth in the cubs' behavior. They had claimed him somehow, accepted him into their tiny pack. Now they saw the security team as a threat to their new pack member. "Everyone needs to back away," Jake said. "Slowly. Do not aim your weapons at them." "I cannot do that, Cadet. Those things are dangerous." As if to prove his point, the alpha cub took a step toward the security team and growled. It was a sound like an earthquake-given voice, full of promise and threat. "Please," Jake said. "Just try it. Back up 20 feet and lower your weapons. I think they will calm down." Martinez looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Jake's voice made him hesitate. After a moment, he gestured to his team. "Fall back to position 2. Keep your weapons ready, but do not aim directly at the targets." As the security team moved back, the cubs' posture changed. They were still alert, still ready to fight, but the immediate aggression faded. The smallest cub moved closer to Jake again, pressing against his leg like a cat seeking comfort. Dr. Vasquez's voice crackled over Martinez's radio. "Sergeant, what is your status?" "We show the cubs in Corridor 7 Alpha. The cubs are contained, Doctor, but we have a situation here. The new logistics cadet is with them, and they appear to be protecting him." There was a long pause. Then Elena's voice came back, filled with disbelief. "Repeat that, Sergeant." "The Vorthak cubs are exhibiting protective behavior toward Cadet Morrison. They will not let us approach him." Another pause. Then Captain Barnes's voice joined the conversation. "Sergeant Martinez, I'm on my way down there with Dr. Vasquez. Do not engage the cubs unless they attack." "And Morrison?" "Yes, ma'am." "Whatever you are doing, keep doing it. This is the first time those cubs have shown positive response to any human being." Jake looked down at the 3 magnificent creatures surrounding him. The smallest cub had stopped shaking. His golden eyes looked brighter, more alert than they had since his mother died. For the first time in months, he looked like he might actually want to live. "I hear you," Jake said quietly. "I do not know why you picked me, but I am honored. We are going to figure this out together." The cubs seemed to understand. They pressed closer to him, their warm bodies creating a circle of trust in the cold metal corridor. And for the first time since arriving at the station, Jake felt like he might actually be able to help solve the impossible problem of the Vorthak cubs. Outside the station, stars wheeled in their ancient patterns. But inside Corridor 7 Alpha, something new was being born. a bond between species that no one had thought possible. Jake did not know it yet, but this moment would change everything. Not just for him and the cubs, but for the entire galaxy's understanding of what it meant to truly communicate across the vast distances that separated one thinking species from another. Captain Barnes stood in her office, staring at the report on her desk. The words seemed impossible, but the video evidence was right there on her computer screen. Jake Morrison, a human cadet with no xenobiology training, had achieved what the galaxy's best animal experts could not do. The Vorthak cubs trusted him. "This could end my career," Lisa said to Elena, who sat across from her desk. Alliance command was very clear. No humans are allowed near dangerous alien species. They think humans are too aggressive, too unpredictable. But look at the results, Elena argued, pointing to the medical readouts on her tablet. The smallest cub ate his first full meal in 3 weeks yesterday. His blood chemistry is improving. For the first time since we captured them, all 3 cubs are showing normal behavior patterns. Lisa looked at the video again. Jake sat in the middle of the cubs' enclosure, which had been hastily repaired after their escape 3 days ago. The cubs were grooming each other, playing gentle games, acting like normal young animals instead of traumatized prisoners. And Jake was just there with them, reading a book, occasionally reaching out to scratch behind an ear or pat a furry head. "How does he do it?" Lisa asked. "We have had Altarian empaths try to bond with those cubs. Empaths can literally feel what other creatures are feeling, but the cubs rejected them completely." "I have been watching Jake work," Elena said. "He does not try to control them or train them. He just exists with them. When they want attention, he gives it. When they want to be left alone, he leaves them alone. He treats them like individuals, not like a problem to be solved." Lisa's communicator buzzed. She glanced at the message and felt her stomach drop. "Alliance Inspector Aaron Mitchell is arriving tomorrow. Someone reported our protocol violations." Elena went pale. "What are we going to do?" "I do not know yet, but I will not let those cubs die because of political nonsense." Lisa stood up and walked to her window. Below them, the planet Kepler 442b turned slowly in space, its surface hidden by clouds. Somewhere down there, adult Vorthak hunted in their ancient forests, free and wild. The cubs have been improving for 3 days. That is not coincidence. Jake is helping them. Alliance Command will not see it that way. They will order Jake transferred off the station immediately. Lisa was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Unless we can prove that Jake's methods work better than traditional approaches." "What if we arranged a formal test?" "What kind of test?" "Inspector Mitchell is bringing Dr. Zexai with him. He is supposed to be the greatest Vorthak expert alive. His people, the Vorthans, are evolutionary cousins to the Vorthak. If anyone should be able to bond with those cubs, it would be him." Elena understood immediately. A challenge. Jake versus the expert. If Jake wins, maybe Alliance Command will reconsider their policies. "It is risky," Lisa said. "If we are wrong, if Dr. Zexai succeeds where Jake failed, then we have no argument left. Jake gets transferred, and we go back to watching those cubs waste away. And if Jake wins, then we have proved that sometimes the best approach is not the most scientific one." 2 hours later, Lisa found Jake in the cub's enclosure. He was sitting cross-legged on the floor while the smallest cub napped with his head in Jake's lap. The other 2 cubs were playing a gentle wrestling game nearby, their movements fluid and graceful. "Jake," Lisa said softly, "we need to talk." Jake looked up, careful not to disturb the sleeping cub. "Is something wrong, Captain?" Lisa explained about the inspector's visit, about Dr. Zexai, about the challenge she was proposing. Jake listened without interrupting, occasionally stroking the fur of the cub in his lap. When she finished, Jake was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "What happens to the cubs if I lose? They will probably be transferred to a maximum security facility, kept in isolation until they die or until someone figures out how to make them cooperate." Jake looked at the 3 young Vorthak. Over the past few days, he had come to know each of them as individuals. The Alpha, whom he had started calling Storm, was brave and protective but also playful when he felt safe. The middle cub, Mist, was curious and intelligent, always investigating new things with careful sniffs and gentle paws. And the smallest one, the sick one he called Shadow, was sweet and affectionate, desperate for the comfort he had lost when his mother died. "I will do it," Jake said, "but I have one condition." "What?" "If Dr. Zexai cannot bond with them, If they reject him the way they rejected everyone else, then Alliance Command has to officially recognize that my methods work. They have to let me continue working with the Cubs. Lisa nodded. I will make sure that gets put in writing. The next day, Inspector Mitchell arrived with considerable fanfare. He was a thin, serious man who carried himself like someone used to being the most important person in any room. Dr. Zexhai was even more impressive, tall and elegant. With the scaled skin and large eyes typical of his species, he wore robes that seemed to shimmer in the light, and he moved with a grace that spoke of centuries of evolution on a world where every step mattered. Captain Barnes, Inspector Mitchell said as they gathered in the observation room above the Cubs' enclosure. I am disappointed. Your reputation suggested someone who followed regulations. I follow the regulation that matters most, Lisa replied. The one that says we preserve life whenever possible. Those Cubs were dying until Jake started working with them. Dr. Zexhai studied Jake through the observation window. Jake was sitting with the Cubs, who seemed completely relaxed in his presence. Shadow was grooming Jake's hair with his rough tongue while Storm and Mist dozed nearby. Interesting, Dr. Zexhai said in his musical voice. The human appears to have achieved some level of acceptance. But acceptance and true bonding are very different things. Fourth Act social structures are incredibly complex. This young man may think he has gained their trust, but he lacks the knowledge to understand what he is really seeing. Then prove it, Elena said. Show us how a real expert handles Vorthak Cubs. Dr. Zexhai smiled, an expression that looked strange on his alien features. Very well. But first, the human must be removed from the enclosure. The Cubs need to see that he is not available to them. Only then will they be open to accepting a new pack leader. Jake did not want to leave the Cubs, but he understood the rules of the challenge. He gently moved Shadow off his lap and stood up. All three Cubs became alert immediately, sensing that something was changing. It is okay, Jake told them. I will be right up there watching. I am not leaving you. As Jake left the enclosure, the Cubs tried to follow him. When the door closed between them, they began to pace anxiously. Shadow let out a small whine that broke Jake's heart. Dr. Zexhai prepared himself carefully. He had brought several pieces of equipment, scent dispensers that would release Vorthon pheromones, a neural interface that could detect emotional states, and a small device that produced sounds in the Vorthak frequency range. Observe, Dr. Zexhai said to the assembled group. Proper xenobiological technique requires understanding the subject species' evolutionary history, social dynamics, and communication methods. Raw intuition is no substitute for scientific knowledge. He entered the enclosure with confident steps. The Cubs immediately focused on him, their bodies tense and alert. Dr. Zexhai activated his pheromone dispenser and began making a series of clicks and whistles that were supposed to mimic Vorthak pack communication. The reaction was immediate and wrong. All three Cubs backed away from Dr. Zexhai, their lips pulling back to show their teeth. Shadow, the gentlest of the three, actually growled. Fascinating, Dr. Zexhai said, apparently not noticing the Cubs' aggressive posture. They are displaying classic dominance testing behavior. This is exactly what I expected. But Jake could see that Dr. Zexhai was misreading the situation completely. The Cubs were not testing dominance. They were afraid. The Vorthon's equipment was making sounds and smells that the Cubs associated with medical procedures and confinement. To them, Dr. Zexhai represented everything they had learned to fear about captivity. As the week progressed, Dr. Zexhai tried every technique in his considerable arsenal. He adjusted pheromone mixtures, modified his approach patterns, even attempted to establish psychic contact using advanced Vorthon mental disciplines. But the Cubs' reaction never changed. They tolerated his presence because they had no choice, but they showed none of the warmth, playfulness, or trust they had displayed with Jake. On the seventh day, Inspector Mitchell was forced to admit what everyone could see. Dr. Zexhai had failed to bond with the Cubs. They had not attacked him, but they had not accepted him either. When Jake was finally allowed back into the enclosure, the transformation was immediate. The Cubs rushed to greet him, and within minutes they were back to their normal, happy behavior. I do not understand it, Dr. Zexhai said, his scientific pride clearly wounded. My methods should have worked. The Cubs should have responded to proper Vorthak social protocols. Jake looked at the distinguished alien scientist with sympathy. Maybe that is the problem, he said gently. You were trying to speak to them in a language they never learned. Their mother was killed when they were very young. They never had a chance to learn normal Vorthak social behavior. They are not looking for a pack leader or a dominant alpha. They are just... Jake had been working officially with the cubs for 2 weeks when the long-range sensors picked up something that made everyone on the station nervous. A ship was approaching from the outer rim, moving fast and broadcasting no identification codes. Captain Barnes called an emergency meeting in the briefing room. Jake sat with Elena, Inspector Mitchell, and the other senior staff, while holographic displays showed the approaching vessel. Ship configuration matches Krillian design, reported Lieutenant Cole from the sensor station. Heavy armor, military-grade weapons, and stealth shielding. They are trying to hide from us, but our deep space sensors caught them anyway. Inspector Mitchell leaned forward in his chair. Krillians are slave traders. They deal in exotic species, especially rare predators. If they are coming here, they are after the cubs, Elena finished. It has to be. Adult Vorthak are almost impossible to capture, but cubs this young could be trained, conditioned into living weapons. Jake felt sick. Over the past weeks, he had watched Storm, Mist, and Shadow grow stronger and happier. They played together, learned new games, and had even started showing curiosity about the world beyond their enclosure. The idea of them being sold to criminals who would torture them into becoming killers was unbearable. How long until they arrive? Captain Barnes asked. 6 hours, maybe 7, Lieutenant Cole replied. Can we run? Not with a research station this size. We are not built for speed, then we fight. Lisa's voice was calm but determined. How many security personnel do we have? 23, including myself, Sergeant Martinez answered. But Captain, Krillian raiders usually travel in groups. If that is just their advance ship, we will deal with whatever comes, Lisa said. Elena, get the cubs to the secure bunker on level 12. That is the most protected area of the station. Jake stood up. I should stay with them. If they get scared, having me there might help keep them calm. Absolutely not, Inspector Mitchell said. You are a logistics cadet, not a security officer. You will go to the civilian shelter with the other non-essential personnel. The cubs are not going to understand what is happening, Jake argued. If shooting starts, if alarms go off, they might panic. I have seen what they can do when they are frightened. They could hurt themselves trying to break out of the bunker. Elena nodded slowly. Jake has a point. The cubs trust him completely now. His presence might be the only thing that keeps them manageable during a crisis. Inspector Mitchell looked like he wanted to argue, but Captain Barnes cut him off. Morrison goes with the cubs. Elena, you go with them too. If something happens to the station, those cubs might be the most important scientific discovery of the century. We cannot let them fall into Krillian hands. As the meeting broke up, Jake hurried to the cubs' enclosure. They seemed to sense his anxiety immediately. Storm, the alpha, pressed against Jake's side while making a low rumbling sound that Jake had learned meant concern. Mist and Shadow moved closer too, forming their protective circle around their human pack member. We have to go somewhere safe, Jake told them quietly. There are bad people coming, people who want to hurt you. But I promise I will not let that happen. Moving the cubs to the secure bunker was easier than Jake had expected. They followed him trustingly through corridors they had never seen before, past worried-looking scientists and security officers preparing for battle. Even when they reached the heavily armored bunker deep in the station's core, the cubs remained calm as long as Jake was with them. The bunker was designed to protect against hull breaches and radiation leaks, but it felt like a tomb. Heavy blast doors, no windows, just artificial lights and recycled air. Elena set up her equipment in one corner while Jake tried to keep the cubs comfortable. Hours passed. Occasionally, Jake's communicator would crackle with updates from the command center. The Krillian ship had arrived and was demanding the immediate surrender of all Vorthak specimens. Captain Barnes was stalling, claiming they needed time to prepare the animals for transport. She is buying us time, Elena said, hoping that an Alliance patrol ship might respond to our distress signal. How long can she stall? Not long. Krillians are not known for their patience. As if to prove her point, the station suddenly shook with the impact of weapons fire. The lights flickered and alarms began wailing throughout the station. The cubs reacted immediately, their fur standing up and their eyes glowing in the dim emergency lighting. Easy, Jake said, sitting down among them. I know it sounds scary, but we are safe here. These walls are very thick. But Jake could hear fear in his own voice, and the cubs could too. They pressed closer to him. and Shadow began making the small whining sounds that meant he was very frightened. Elena's communicator suddenly buzzed with a priority message. Dr. Vasquez, we have breaches on levels 4 and 6. Krillian boarding parties are inside the station. All personnel to emergency stations. The Cubs heard the fear in Elena's voice and began pacing anxiously around the bunker. Storm let out a low howl and the others quickly joined in. The sound echoed off the metal walls like thunder. They want to fight, Jake realized. They can sense the danger and their instincts are telling them to protect their territory. We cannot let them out, Elena said. If they encounter the Krillians would kill them, Jake finished. Or worse, capture them alive. But the Cubs were getting more agitated by the minute. They could smell the fear scent coming from Jake and Elena, could hear the sounds of battle echoing through the station's hull. Everything in their genetic code was telling them to act, to hunt, to defend their pack. Jake's communicator crackled with Sergeant Martinez's voice. All security teams to level 7. The raiders are trying to reach the laboratory levels. We are falling back to defensive positions. They are coming this way, Elena whispered. Jake looked at the 3 magnificent creatures pacing around him. Storm was nearly full-grown now, his muscles rippling under his dark fur. Mist had become sleek and graceful, every movement controlled and precise. Even little Shadow had grown strong and confident under Jake's care. An idea began forming in Jake's mind. It was crazy, dangerous, probably suicidal, but as he listened to the sounds of battle getting closer, he realized it might be their only chance. Elena, he said quietly, what do you know about Vorthak hunting behavior? They are pack hunters. Highly coordinated, incredibly intelligent tactical fighters. They can move through terrain that would stop most predators, and they communicate through scent marking and vocalizations that... Elena stopped talking and stared at Jake. What are you thinking? I am thinking that maybe we have been protecting the Cubs from the wrong thing. Maybe instead of hiding them from the danger, we should be using their natural abilities to fight it. Jake, no. Those are Krillian soldiers out there, trained killers with military-grade weapons. The Cubs are still young. They could be hurt, or worse. But Storm had heard something in Jake's voice, some change in his emotional scent that caught the big Cub's attention. The Alpha moved closer to Jake, golden eyes fixed on his human pack leader's face. Jake reached out and placed his hand on Storm's massive head. The Cub's fur was warm and soft, but Jake could feel the incredible strength in the muscles underneath. This was not a pet or a laboratory specimen. This was an apex predator, bred by millions of years of evolution to be the perfect hunter. I know you want to protect us, Jake whispered. I know you can feel that our pack is in danger. But are you ready? Are you all ready to fight for real? Storm's response was immediate and unmistakable. The big Cub pressed his forehead against Jake's chest and let out a sound Jake had never heard before. A deep, thrumming growl that seemed to vibrate through his bones. It was not a sound of fear or anger. It was a sound of acceptance, of readiness, of a warrior acknowledging his commander. Mist and Shadow moved closer, adding their own voices to Storm's call. The sound they made together was like nothing Jake had ever experienced. It was the sound of the hunt beginning, of predators preparing to reclaim their territory. Elena stared at the scene in amazement. Jake, what are you doing to them? I am not doing anything, Jake replied, never taking his eyes off Storm's golden gaze. I am just finally letting them be what they were born to be. The station shook again with weapons fire, and this time the lights went out completely. In the darkness, 3 pairs of golden eyes glowed like stars, and Jake Morrison realized that the real battle was just beginning. Outside the bunker, Krillian soldiers moved through the corridors of the research station. Confident in their superior numbers and firepower, they had captured stations like this before, had taken countless rare creatures to sell in the illegal markets of the Outer Rim, but they had never faced a human who understood that sometimes the best way to protect something was to set it free. And they had never encountered Vorthak Cubs who had been raised not as specimens but as family. The hunters were about to become the hunted. Jake placed his hand on the bunker's door controls and looked back at Elena. She was pale with fear, but she nodded at him. They both knew this was insane. They also knew it was their only chance. Stay here, Jake told her. Monitor communications. If this goes wrong... It will not go wrong, Elena said firmly. Those Cubs would die before they let anything happen to you. Jake opened the blast doors. The corridor beyond was dark, except for the red emergency lighting. Somewhere in the distance he could hear weapons fire and shouting. The Krillian raiders were getting closer. Storm emerged from the bunker first, moving like a shadow made solid. His massive head swung from side to side, nostrils flaring as he analyzed the scents in the air. Mist and Shadow followed, their own senses extended, reading information from the environment that Jake could not even imagine. The cubs had transformed. Gone was the playful behavior Jake was used to. These were predators now, focused and deadly. But when Storm looked back at Jake, the golden eyes still held the same trust and affection they always had. The cub was not just hunting. He was protecting his pack leader. Jake pulled up the station schematics on his tablet. The Krillians had breached levels 4 and 6, but they would have to pass through level 8 to reach the laboratory areas where they thought the cubs were being held. If Jake and the cubs could get there first. "This way," Jake whispered, pointing down a side corridor. "We can reach level 8 through the maintenance shafts." The cubs understood immediately. They had explored much of the station during their training sessions with Jake, learning its layout through scent and memory. Now that knowledge would serve them in ways Jake had never intended. They moved through the station like ghosts. The cubs' paws made no sound on the metal floors, and they seemed to know exactly where to step to avoid the creaking plates that might give them away. Jake tried to match their silent movement, following Storm's lead as they navigated through passages he had never seen before. They reached level 8, just as the first Krillian soldiers rounded the corner at the far end of the main corridor. Jake got his first look at their enemies and felt his blood chill. The Krillians were reptilian, with scaled skin and cold yellow eyes. They wore advanced combat armor and carried energy weapons that could cut through steel. There were 6 of them in this group, moving in perfect military formation. They paused at each doorway, checking rooms systematically as they searched for their valuable prey. Storm pressed against Jake's side and made a sound so quiet, Jake felt it more than heard it. The cub was asking for permission to attack. Beside him, Mist and Shadow were equally tense, ready to spring into action at Jake's command. Jake looked at the soldiers again. 6 trained killers with military weapons against 3 young predators and a human logistics cadet. The odds were impossible. But Jake remembered something his father had told him years ago. Sometimes, being outnumbered just means you have more targets to choose from. "Wait for my signal," Jake breathed to the cubs. "Storm, take the leader. Mist, Shadow, follow his lead. And remember, these are not the people who killed your mother, but they work for the same kind of evil. Make them pay." The cubs' eyes blazed with understanding. They spread out along the corridor, using the shadows and the irregular lighting to hide their approach. Jake had seen them hunt small prey animals during their exercises, but this was different. This was war. Jake stepped out into the main corridor. The Krillians spotted him immediately. Their leader, a scarred veteran with cybernetic implants replacing one eye, raised his weapon. "Human," the leader hissed in accented galactic standard. "Where are the Vorthak specimens? Speak quickly and your death will be painless." "They are right here," Jake said calmly. Storm exploded out of the shadows like black lightning. The Krillian leader had perhaps 1 second to register the massive predator launching itself at him before 200 pounds of muscle and fury slammed into his chest. His scream was cut short as Storm's jaws closed around his throat. The other soldiers tried to react, but they had no time. Mist appeared behind 2 of them, moving so fast she seemed to teleport. Her claws, as sharp as razors, found the gaps in their armor with surgical precision. Shadow, the smallest of the cubs, took down a soldier twice his size by going for the knees, bringing the enemy down where he could reach the vulnerable neck area. The battle lasted less than 30 seconds. When it was over, 6 Krillian soldiers lay dead in the corridor, and the cubs had barely worked up a sweat. Jake stared at the scene in amazement and horror. He had known the cubs were dangerous, but seeing them in actual combat was something else entirely. "Good work," he said quietly. The cubs gathered around him, their fur still dark with shadows, but their eyes bright with the satisfaction of a successful hunt. "But this is just the beginning. There are more of them." Jake's communicator crackled with Captain Barnes's voice. "All stations, we have multiple breach points. Enemy forces are moving toward the research levels. Security teams Alpha and Beta are pinned down on level 5. We need backup. Captain, Jake said into his communicator. This is Morrison. I am on level 8 with reinforcements. We are moving to assist your people. Morrison? What are you doing out of the bunker? Get back to safety immediately. Respectfully, Captain, I think we can do more good out here. Trust me on this. Before Barnes could respond, Jake switched off his communicator and looked at his 3 companions. They were watching him with intelligent eyes, waiting for orders from their pack leader. We need to help the security teams, Jake told them. But we have to be smart about this. No rushing in blindly. We use the station's layout against the enemies. Hit and run, strike from shadows, make them afraid of every corner and every doorway. The Cubs understood the tactical concept immediately. They had been born for this kind of fighting, ambush hunting, pack coordination, using terrain to maximum advantage. What they were about to do was simply an extension of their natural behavior, scaled up to face bipedal prey instead of 4-legged animals. They moved through the station like a plague of shadows. The Cubs had memorized every ventilation shaft, every maintenance corridor, every hidden passage. They could appear anywhere, strike without warning, and vanish before the enemy could respond effectively. The first rescue came on level 5, where Sergeant Martinez and 4 of his people were trapped in a storage room by 8 Krillian soldiers. Jake and the Cubs came at the raiders from 3 different directions at once, using the complex intersection of corridors to create impossible angles of attack. By the time the shooting stopped, 8 more Krillians were dead and the security team was free. Martinez stared at Jake and the Cubs with something approaching awe. What are you doing out here? Saving the station, Jake replied simply. Where are the rest of them? Main lab complex, level 6. At least 20 soldiers, maybe more. They have Captain Barnes and her command staff trapped in the central hub. Jake felt his heart skip. If the Krillians captured Captain Barnes, they would have the station's command codes, access to all systems. They could lock down the defenses, open all the containment areas, take whatever they wanted. Can you hold this position? Jake asked Martinez. With those things helping us? Martinez looked at the Cubs with new respect. We can hold anything. Jake and the Cubs made their way to level 6, but this time the enemy was ready for them. The Krillians had learned that something was hunting their forces, and they had set up defensive positions with overlapping fields of fire. The main corridor leading to the lab complex was a killing ground. But Jake was learning too. He was beginning to understand how the Cubs thought, how they processed information about terrain and enemy positions. When Storm pressed against his side and made a questioning sound, Jake knew the Cub was asking about attack patterns. Jake pulled up the station schematics again, studying the layout around the lab complex. There was a pattern there, a weakness in the Krillian defensive positions that human tactical training would never have revealed, but predator instincts could exploit. The ventilation system, Jake whispered. They are covering all the corridors, but they cannot watch the air ducts. The Cubs' ears perked up. They had spent weeks exploring those ducts during their training. They knew every twist and turn, every exit point. Storm, can you get into the main lab through the central air shaft? Mist, Shadow, you take the secondary labs. I will create a distraction in the main corridor. The Cubs looked at each other, then at Jake. There was a moment of communication between them that Jake could not quite follow, some exchange of scent and subtle body language. Then Storm pressed his massive head against Jake's chest and made that deep, thrumming sound of acceptance. But instead of moving toward the ventilation shafts, Storm did something that surprised Jake completely. The big Cub gently grabbed Jake's shirt in his teeth and pulled him toward the central air duct. You want me to come with you? Jake asked. Storm's golden eyes were absolutely steady. The message was clear. Where the pack leader went, the pack followed. Jake looked at the narrow air duct, then at Storm's massive frame. It would be a tight fit, but they could make it work. And suddenly Jake realized what the Cubs had been trying to tell him all along. They were not